I don't know anybody here who doesn't know him, but he's going to be tying some emergers for us. And if you know George, he's not tying something that won't work. So.
Yeah, these are a couple flies that I've been using mostly for the blueing olive hatches in Wyoming and Utah the last couple of years, and they work here fine. And for you guys that are going to go with Gene to the Missouri, they're both good flies. You're just going to have to make them smaller. Because unfortunately, the bluing olives in September in or Missouri are probably what, 20s, 22s.
20s. They're going to be 20s.
Yeah, they're going to be 20s.
22s, but sure, nothing bigger than 20s.
So we've got two flies. One of them's a real breeze to tie, one of them's a real pain to tie. But the one they call lowrider, I've been using that for an indicator fly, and then I'm hanging the other fly behind it, and I actually get as many fish on both of them. So it's been a really good producer for me. Had like a 50 fish day on those two flies just in March. So and they're tied with CDC. They both have CDC feathers in them, which is Colt canard, which is butt of the duck. They're the preen feathers off the back of a duck. And one thing you absolutely have to have when you're using CDC is, does that show up?
Yep.
This is my favorite. It's called Frog's Fanny. Gene and I kind of differ on this. He likes Shimazaki, but it's a desiccant. The thing I like about this is it comes with this brush, because I don't want that entire fly to float. I just want to get the CDC and the hackle puffed up, and I want them they ride low. So if you put them in Shimazaki and shake it up, the whole fly gets powdered up, and then they ride higher, and I don't want that. So what I'll do whenever I catch a fish on these things, I grab it by the hook and then I just take that brush and I scrub the CDC and the hackle only, not the body or the hook or anything, so they float low in the water. If you throw them in Shimazaki, you shake them up, the entire fly gets powdered up. And these things, once you catch a fish, if you don't powder them up, you might as well throw it away and get another one because they won't float. Now you use the CDC oil, don't you?
Yes.
And most of the CDC you get has been treated. This is Trout Hunters, and they call these natural CD puffs. And I don't know if you can see but they're treated with preen oil from the duck. And the only thing I don't like about it is, I don't know if you can see in these packages, but some of them are kind of clumped up, where they put too much preen oil on them. So you have to kind of powder them up to fluff them out. But this is what they look like when you're tying with them, and they should be puffed out like that. You can look at those samples. So this first one is a fly of mine. It's just an emerger, and most of it floats under the water, and the CDC is what holds it up. So what I found with CDC, too much is better than not enough. I don't think you can put too much on there, because when you think you've got enough, and then when it gets wet, it doesn't look right. So you need enough to float it. So let me get my thread on here. Is that in focus? Can you say that? Somewhat.
He's going to zoom in a second. There it is.
Okay. Now this is a 16, and I'm using the Dairiki 125, same as a Tiemco 2488. It's a 2x short shank. So I'm using a 16, which would equate to lengthwise to almost a 20. So it's a short shanked hook. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of a tail on this thing. So I'm using teal flank here. You can use mallard. It's dyed kind of a wood duck color. Beta nymphs are actually pretty dark. They're usually a browny black color. So this kind of represents the nymph coming out of its shuck and hatching. So I'm going to get about a half a dozen fibers for the tail. Tie them down the bend a ways. And I'm going to come back up.
What color thread, George?
Use an olive bill but you could use brown. Like a rusty brown too. But just use olive. I usually use olive for the beta nymphs. So now I'm going to add a little bit of a trailing shuck on this thing too, and you can use Zelon, and I've got some Antron yarn here. And you don't need very much. I'm just going to use 6 or 8 fibers probably. You see that? Not going to be very much. So I'm going to tie it, and the thread's going to make the abdomen of this fly. You can use one of those samples. I used micro tubing on it, and that looks kind of cool too. Makes a little fatter body. So I'm going to wind this down right to the base of the tail. I'm going to bring it back up, and I'm going to kind of try to build a little bit of a taper here. I'm going to cut that off. Then I'm going to trim this about half the length of the tail. So we're halfway done. I'm going to bring my thread almost to the eye. And up in here. And for these bluing olives, you can use gray, or you can use a kind of an olive mixture. I've seen them a lot of different colors. Just depends where you're fishing, but I'm not sure the fish really care about the color too much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of dub this thing in 2 parts. I'm going to dub a little ball in the front, then I'm going to skip a little bit, and I'm going to dub a second part in the back. And the reason for that is when I tie this CDC wing in, it's going to create a little V, and it's going to suck that feather down, and it's going to kick it up instead of having it lay flat over.
What are you using for dubbing?
This is some stuff I just got. It's a UV dub. It's okay. It's got some UV fibers in it. It's supposed to, I don't know, if a fly this small, I'm not sure it makes any difference. But you know, superfine is one of my favorites for this kind of stuff. For natural stuff, beaver. Still like beaver real well. I'm going to build a little ball up here, then I'm going to kind of work my way back and leave a little gap in the middle there. Does that show up at all? Can you see that on the screen? So my thread's right in the middle of the dubbing. So now I'm going to use the CDC feather. I'm going to usually use 2. These are pretty big. So what you want to do with these things is you want to match, kind of try to match the tips up on them. This may almost be too much. These are pretty big.
George, these are the puffs.
These are the puffs. Yeah, I'm not using the full feather. They're, you know, they've got a little more substance to them than the regular CDC are a lot more airy. And what you want to do when you're kind of matching these things, you want to get them lined up the direction you're going to tie them in on. So this wing's going to be upright, and I want to tie them out this way. If I was going to tie the other fly, the low rider, I would match my feathers up, go in the other direction, the direction I want to tie them in on, so I don't have to keep manipulating with my fingers. So you get them together, and then you kind of preen them together. And you want to, so you bunch them up and get the length you want. And I want the wing to be about the length of the hook shank from the eye to about where I ended the body. I'm going to set it at that point. I'm going to get a wrap, and I'm going to make a good tight wrap, and I want about 3 good wraps here. 3 to 4 good wraps. Then you make the back just like the old Quigley cripple where you used to leave a clump of deer hair. I'm going to leave a clump of CDC. I'm just going to cut it off straight. And I've got a little bit of bulk left there. Then I'm just going to bring this wing up, get my thread in front. Now I'm going to use a little more dubbing, and I'm going to stand the wing up. It's going to be like a kind of like a sparkle done wing. take that dubbing and I'm going to go back underneath that wing a little bit. And I'll post it up. And I'm just going to whip finish it off. 3 or 4 whips. And that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. If I wasn't talking, I could tie that in about 2 minutes. It's extremely effective. I was on the Green River about 3 weeks ago in Utah and whacked a bunch of nice big fish during the beta hatch on that thing. Floats like a cork, but like I say, you've got to powder it up every time. And you don't want to get the back end have it floating. And it just kind of hangs in the film.
So I need to buy some frog fanning to do something like that. Because
Yeah,
normally I'm interested in powdering the
whole
whole
thing,
line,
yeah,
and this,
yeah.
you know, frog fanning.
So you know, when I'm fishing this thing, basically what I do is I grab it by the hook and I just take it, cover everything up, and I just scrub it till it pops back out, because it'll be full of fish slime. You kind of wash it off first and then get in there and scrub it. The only downside to this stuff is, you know, every time you pull a brush out, you lose a buck's worth because it all flies off. So, but I figure it cost me $20 a year, and I've spent $7,000 for fishing for the year. So what the hell? Yeah.
So George, that first ball that you put in front before the gap almost looks like it's part of the head.
Yeah, it's small.
Be the head.
It's smaller, yeah. But you know what I'm saying? When I tie that feather in, it kind of kicks them up like that.
Right.
So it locks it down in there, and then you can get that dubbing in there. Things hold up really well too. And it's easy to tie. If you lose them, no big deal.
Why did you leave the little gap when you were tying the dubbing on?
In between?
Yeah.
Because that sucks that feather down when I tie the feather down.
Oh,
So the dubbing, I had like 2 balls of dubbing kind of.
Yeah.
So when I put the feather in the middle, it just, it takes that flat feather and does that to it, locks it down, and then it gives me a place when I put the dubbing in, it fills in that gap, and that feather's locked in there really good, even though I only have three wraps on it. So.